A poor cleaning lady attempts to poison a millionaire CEO. Will her plan succeed, or will she get caught? Let's find out in this video. One morning in Mr. Matthews' grand mansion, the sun spilled softly through the glass windows, casting golden patterns on the dining table. Everything seemed peaceful until Sophia, the house cleaner who also served as a maid, entered the room with a strange look in her eyes. She walked slowly, too slowly, her eyes darting around like someone being followed. As she neared the dining table where a cup of hot tea sat waiting for Mr. Matthew, she suddenly paused and glanced up. Mounted in the corner was the CCTV camera, its red light blinking. Without hesitation, she climbed slightly onto a stool, reached up, and gently turned the camera's head away, just enough so it could no longer see the table. Then, with her hand tucked inside her apron, she brought out a small bottle with a black lid. Her fingers shook slightly, but her face stayed calm. She uncapped it and poured a few drops of a clear, scentless liquid into the steaming tea. What she didn't know was that James, Mr. Matthews' 5-year-old son, had been hiding behind the curtain in the hallway, clutching his toy car. He had come down early, hoping to convince his dad to play before work. But when he saw Sophia act strange with the camera, curiosity held him still. James peeked carefully, watching as the maid stirred the tea slowly, her eyes fixed on the hallway. His small heart thudded. He didn't fully understand what poison was, but he'd seen enough cartoons to know when someone was up to no good. Sophia placed the teaspoon down and walked out quietly, just as Mr. Matthews' footsteps echoed from upstairs. James looked at the cup, then at the door. He had to do something. He couldn't let his daddy drink that tea. But how could he stop him without getting in trouble or putting himself in danger? And just like that, the peaceful morning turned into the beginning of a dark secret that only a brave little boy knew. Sophia walked past Mr. Matthew with a polite smile. "Good morning, sir," she said softly, her hands folded neatly in front of her. "Morning, Sophia," he replied without looking, already focused on the steaming tea waiting on the table. James stood near the hallway, half hidden, frozen in place, his tiny fists clenched, lips trembling. He had just seen her, seen what she did, but the words wouldn't come. His mouth opened, nothing. Mr. Matthew sat down, lifted the cup, and took a long sip. James flinched. Another sip. The boy's heartbeat pounded in his ears. Was he too late? Should he run, scream? Mr. Matthew stood up, grabbed his briefcase, and walked over to James. He smiled, ruffled the boy's hair. "Goodbye, my boy, be good." James stared, eyes wide, throat tight. "You're unusually quiet today," his father added with a chuckle. "See you tonight." He turned, opened the door, and left. The door clicked shut. James didn't blink. Did Daddy just drink poison? Was he going to die? And if he did, would anyone believe a 5-year-old who couldn't speak? Meanwhile, across town in a high-rise office overlooking the skyline, Mr. George sat behind his glass desk, fingers steepled, eyes glued to a glowing digital map of market projections. His company, Gold Edge Enterprises, was locked in a brutal battle for a government contract worth millions. His only obstacle? Mr. Matthew, the man with the upper hand. But George didn't play fair. He had waited patiently for the perfect opportunity, and when he heard Matthew needed a new maid, he made his move. Sophia was not just a cleaner. She had been trained, prepped, and placed precisely for this moment. Now, as the city buzzed beneath him, George's private phone lit up. He answered calmly. "Yes?" Sophia's voice came through, low and precise. "It's done. He drank the tea." George leaned back, the hint of a smile playing on his lips. "Perfect. You've done well, Sophia." No suspicion. He even smiled at me on the way out. George chuckled softly. "Good, but stay alert. If the poison doesn't act fast, you'll need to finish it another way. No mistakes." "I understand," she replied. As the call ended, George stood and stared out the window. Mr. Matthew had no idea his most trusted maid was a silent weapon placed by the enemy, and as George sipped his scotch, he whispered to himself, "Let the empire fall quietly." At exactly 11:47 a.m., Mr. Matthew sat in his office staring at his laptop screen when the dizziness hit him like a wave. His vision blurred, his hands trembled, cold sweat slid down his forehead. He gripped the edge of his desk, heart racing. The room began to spin. "Help!" he mumbled, barely audible. Then louder, "Help!" A secretary passing by heard the cry and rushed in. "Sir? Sir?" Mr. Matthew slumped forward, gasping. Panic erupted. Within seconds, more staff flooded the room. Someone dialed emergency services while 2 others helped lower him to the floor. His lips turned pale, his breath shallow. At the hospital, doctors worked urgently. Blood samples, scans, and IVs were administered in a blur of white coats and flashing monitors. Minutes later, the head doctor emerged with a grim expression. "It's poison," he said firmly. "Deliberate. Slow acting." Shock swept through the room. As machines beeped steadily in the background, Mr. Matthew lay unconscious. After the doctor confirmed that Mr. Matthew had been poisoned, the police wasted no time in opening a full investigation. Suspicion immediately turned to everything he had consumed that day. Later that afternoon, several staff members from Mr. Matthew's company were invited to the police station for questioning. Among them was Sandra, a junior employee who often handled errands for him. Sitting nervously in the interrogation room, Sandra kept her hands folded in her lap as two detectives looked over their notes. "Tell us about the lunch Mr. Matthew had today," one of them asked. Sandra nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. After he arrived at the office, he asked me to order his usual jollof rice and grilled chicken from the restaurant he always uses." "Did you touch the food at any point?" the other detective pressed. "No, sir. I only received it from the delivery guy and took it straight to his office. I never opened it." The detectives exchanged a look. The food seemed clean, but something else had reached Mr. Matthew before lunch. Now suspicion quietly turned toward the mansion and what he had consumed before ever leaving home. The next morning, Sophia was invited to the station for questioning. Calm and composed, she sat across from the detectives, her hands resting neatly on her lap. "Tell us about Mr. Matthew's morning routine," one officer began. Sophia nodded politely. "He usually takes tea before leaving for work. That morning, I made his tea in the kitchen as usual." "And did you see anyone near the tea before he drank it?" the other detective asked. Sophia hesitated, then leaned forward slightly. "Actually, after I prepared the tea, I left the kitchen briefly to fetch a cloth from the storage room. When I returned, I saw Mrs. Matthew, his wife, coming out of the kitchen." The detectives raised their eyebrows. Sophia continued. "She didn't say anything, just smiled and walked away. I didn't think much of it until now." One detective flipped through a file. "Records show Mr. and Mrs. Matthew had a loud argument about 2 weeks ago. Staff said it was serious." Sophia nodded slowly. "Yes, we all heard it." The room went quiet. The pieces were shifting, and now suspicion had a new name: Mrs. Matthew. Hannah arrived at the station. She sat confidently across from the detectives as the questioning began. "Were you in the kitchen on the morning Mr. Matthew was poisoned?" one of them asked. She shook her head firmly. "No, I was in the bedroom the entire time, helping my husband get ready. I never stepped foot in the kitchen that morning." The lead detective leaned forward. "Sophia claims she saw you exiting the kitchen just before your husband drank the tea." Mrs. Hannah's expression shifted. Her eyes narrowed and turned sharply toward Sophia, who sat silently in the corner. "You're lying!" Mrs. Hannah snapped. "Why would you say that? I never went near the kitchen." "You're trying to frame me!" Sophia's gaze stayed cold. "I know what I saw." The room tensed. The detectives exchanged looks, noting the crack in Mrs. Hannah's calm. "Until we know more," the officer said, "no one is leaving the city. We'll be reviewing the house CCTV footage next." A silent war had begun, and now the truth was buried between two women and one poisoned cup. While Mr. Matthew lay in the hospital, slowly regaining strength, the mansion felt unusually quiet. In her room, Sophia sat on the edge of her bed, her hands shaking slightly as she stared at the floor. The weight of what she had done pressed heavily on her chest. Suddenly, the door opened with a soft creak. Little James stood there, holding his stuffed lion tightly against his chest. He walked in slowly, his eyes wide but serious. Sophia quickly wiped her palms on her apron and forced a smile. "James, do you need something?" He didn't answer right away. He walked closer, then stopped in front of her. "I saw you," he said quietly. Sophia froze. "I saw you put something in Daddy's tea that morning," James whispered, his voice trembling. "But I was scared to talk." Her heart pounded in her chest. James looked down at his toy, then back up at her. "Is my daddy going to be okay?" Sophia couldn't speak. Her throat tightened as guilt and fear wrapped around her like a noose. And in that moment, the smallest voice in the house carried the loudest truth, one she could no longer hide. Sophia's eyes widened in shock. Her heart skipped a beat as James's innocent words echoed in her ears. "I saw you." She dropped to her knees, grabbing his small shoulders. Her voice dropped low, sharp like a knife. Listen to me, James, she whispered, her face suddenly cold. If you tell anyone at all, I will kill you. Do you hear me? James froze, his eyes filling with fear. I'm not playing, she hissed. If one word leaves your mouth, even by mistake, no one will find you again. He nodded slowly, trembling. From that day, everything changed. Sophia kept a close eye on James. Too close. She followed him everywhere, watched what he ate, who he spoke to, and where he played. To everyone else, it looked like she'd grown fond of the boy. But James knew the truth. Behind every smile she gave him was a silent threat. Every hug, a warning. And every night he lay in bed, clutching his stuffed lion, praying someone would see the danger that no one else could. The maid who once served his father now watched him like a hawk, and he was trapped in silence. Now Sophia knew her time was running out. Mr. Matthew was recovering faster than expected, and rumors of a house investigation were growing stronger. If the police searched the mansion and found the poison container, everything would fall apart. She had to act, fast. One quiet afternoon, with the sun casting long shadows through the hallway, Sophia got her chance. Hannah had just left to visit her husband at the hospital. The house was nearly silent, except for the distant sound of birds outside. Sophia moved swiftly, the small poison vial wrapped tightly in a cloth and hidden beneath her apron. Her footsteps were light as she made her way to Mrs. Matthews' bedroom. She gently pushed open the door. The scent of lavender drifted from the pillows. Everything was in its place, neat, organized, perfect. She opened a drawer, too clean, looked under the bed, too exposed. Then she moved to the large wooden wardrobe. Digging through a stack of handbags, she found one tucked deep at the back. Without hesitation, she slipped the vial into a zipped inner pocket and placed the bag exactly where it had been. "Let the blame fall where it may," she whispered, her lips curling into a quiet smile. She closed the wardrobe and stepped out, gently shutting the door behind her. 2 days later, Mr. Matthews' mansion buzzed with tension as police officers moved through every corner of the house. Their black boots echoed off the polished floors as they searched, guided by a growing suspicion that the poison had been hidden somewhere inside. Hannah had just returned from the hospital when she saw the officers. "What's going on here?" she asked, alarmed. "We have a warrant to search the house," one officer replied. "There's reason to believe the poison may have been stored on the premises." Sophia stood silently in the corner, her expression unreadable. After a long search, a voice called from upstairs. "Sir, we found something in Madame's wardrobe." Everyone turned as an officer descended the stairs holding a small handbag. From it, he pulled out a glass vial, carefully sealed. The same poison that had nearly ended Mr. Matthews' life. Hannah's eyes widened. "That's not mine. I've never seen that before." But it was too late. The officers moved in and placed her in handcuffs. "Mama!" James screamed from the stairs, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Mama, no! Please don't take her!" Hannah looked back, struggling against her tears. "James, I didn't do it, I promise!" But the cuffs clicked shut. She was led away. Sophia stood in silence, her plan unfolding just as she'd hoped. Except for one thing, James was crying not just from pain, but from knowing the truth. And one day, he might finally speak. A few days passed, and Mr. Matthews' strength began to return. Though his body was healing, his heart carried a heavy burden, the thought that the woman he once trusted most might have tried to end his life. Unable to carry the weight of silence any longer, he requested to visit Hannah at the city detention center. He was escorted to a small cold room where a metal table divided them. Moments later, Hannah was led in, her eyes locked onto his, full of pain and desperation. "Matthew," she whispered, her voice cracking. He didn't answer right away. He sat down, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "So, this is where it ends? You wanted me dead? Because of a quarrel?" Hannah gasped. "No, I would never. Matthew, I didn't do it. Someone is trying to destroy us. You have to believe me." He stared at her, torn between anger and doubt. "They found the poison in your wardrobe, Hannah. That's not a coincidence." "I don't know how it got there," she cried. "Please, I've been framed." Matthew stood slowly, the pain in his eyes deeper than any wound. "I don't know what to believe anymore." As he turned to leave, Hannah gripped the edge of the table, trembling. "Please don't give up on me." He hesitated, then walked away without a word. And back at home, a little boy named James sat on his bed, replaying the moment he saw the truth. carrying a secret that could shatter the lie. That evening, Mr. Matthew sat alone in the dimly lit parlor, his thoughts swirling like a storm. He couldn't shake the image of Hannah behind bars, pleading for him to believe her. Doubt clawed at his chest. Could she really have done it? Just then, James shuffled into the room, clutching his toy. He stood quietly for a moment, then tugged at his father's sleeve. "Daddy," James said softly. Mr. Matthew looked down, surprised. "Yes, James." James hesitated, then whispered, "It wasn't Mommy. I saw Sophia. She put something in your tea." Matthew froze. "What did you say?" James looked down. "That morning, Sophia made your tea. Then she hid something in her hand. I was scared. She told me she'd hurt me if I said anything." Mr. Matthew's heart pounded. "Are you sure, James?" The boy nodded slowly, eyes full of guilt. "I'm sorry, Daddy." Matthew leaned back, stunned. The weight of realization hit him hard. It wasn't Hannah. He stood up at once, his hands trembling. Everything had to be re-examined. The real traitor wasn't in a cell, it was under his own roof. And now the truth had finally found its way to the light. Without wasting a second, Mr. Matthew grabbed his phone and called the police. His voice was firm but urgent. "It's Sophia. She's the one who tried to poison me. Come quickly, before she suspects and runs." Within minutes, sirens wailed outside the mansion. Officers rushed in and cornered Sophia in the kitchen. She froze, her eyes darting nervously. "What is this? Why are you arresting me?" she protested. Mr. Matthew stepped forward. "James saw you. He told me everything." Sophia's face twisted. "He's just a child. He's lying." But James stepped up bravely. "She said if I told anyone, she would kill me," he said, voice trembling but clear. The room fell silent. The officers didn't hesitate. "You're under arrest for attempted murder," one said as they cuffed her. Sophia screamed, but it was over. Justice had found her. And for the first time in days, Mr. Matthew felt the weight begin to lift. At the station, under pressure, and with no more lies to cling to, Sophia finally broke. "I didn't do it for myself," she whispered, eyes red with tears. "I was sent by Mr. George." The officer leaned forward. "Mr. George? The CEO of Gold Edge Enterprises?" She nodded. "He paid me. Told me to get close. Said it was the only way to stop Mr. Matthew from winning the government project. I didn't want to, but I was desperate." Within hours, Mr. George was arrested at his company's headquarters. The news sent shockwaves across the business world. 2 rival companies, a poisoned CEO, and a web of betrayal. When Mr. Matthew heard the name, he was stunned. "George? We were both bidding for the same project, but I never imagined he'd stoop this low." But the truth had come out. Hannah was immediately cleared and released. The moment she stepped out of the station, Matthew was there waiting, eyes full of regret. She approached slowly, unsure. "I'm sorry," Matthew said, his voice barely above a whisper. "For doubting you, for not fighting harder to believe you. I should have known. I let fear cloud my judgment." Hannah looked at him for a long moment, then sighed. "You broke my heart, Matthew, but I understand. It all happened so fast. Please don't be offended by my mistake," he said, reaching for her hand. "Come home. Let's start again. Together." Tears welled in Hannah's eyes, but she nodded, and as they walked out of the station, hand in hand, a new beginning quietly unfolded. This time, with no secrets left in the shadows. Never judge too quickly. Truth often hides in silence, and trust, once broken, can only be rebuilt with honesty, patience, and courage.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support helps grow this community and brings more thrilling stories your way. Stay tuned. Another suspenseful tale is coming soon.